I had arrived home for Thanksgiving. An icy chill filled the air. A message upon the counter said, "We're on a cruise, you handle Victor." I discovered his dying stepfather, trembling in the shadows. They had abandoned him to perish. His eyes fluttered open, then he whispered, "They're clueless. Help me get my revenge the moment they return." Can you imagine driving 3 hours through a blizzard, dreaming of a warm hug from your husband, only to walk into a house so cold it felt like a tomb, filled with a stench that hit you like a physical blow? And then, on the kitchen counter, finding a note that read, "Mom and I went on a cruise. You take care of Victor." That's exactly what happened to me. They left a dying man, my terminally ill stepfather, freezing and starving in his own filth, while they sipped cocktails at sea, using my house savings. They thought I was just a soldier who followed orders. My name is Jenna, a 32-year-old Army sergeant, and I just returned from 6 grueling months of field training. The drive from Fort Bragg had taken forever. North Carolina winter had turned the interstate into a treacherous mess. But I didn't care. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, but my heart felt lighter than it had in half a year. 6 months of mud, MREs, and artillery simulators. Now, all I could think about was a hot shower, a glass of red wine, and Brady. Brady Mitchell. My husband. Even after 5 years, just saying his name made me smile like a schoolgirl. He wasn't military. He was soft edges and charming smiles, a real estate consultant who spent more time on golf courses than selling houses. But I didn't mind. I was the provider, the protector. That was my role. I just wanted him to be there. I pulled into Walmart, joining the chaotic swarm of last-minute holiday shoppers. Mariah Carey blasted as I navigated the aisles with military precision, grabbing a 20-pound turkey, a bag of potatoes, 2 expensive bottles of Cabernet. I wanted this Thanksgiving to be perfect. I wanted to roast that bird, fill the house with the smell of sage and rosemary, and pretend, just for a weekend, that we were a normal family. I even picked up a small carton of peach yogurt for Victor, Brady's stepfather. I knew the pancreatic cancer had ruined his appetite, but maybe, just maybe, he could keep that down. When I finally turned onto our street, the neighborhood was a postcard. The Smiths had their inflatable reindeer up. The Johnsons' walkway glowed with candy cane lights. It was warm, inviting. But my house was dark. A small knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. I told myself Brady was napping, or maybe watching the game in the back. I parked, grabbed the groceries, and unlocked the front door. "Brady, I'm home," I called out, kicking the door shut to block the wind. Silence. Not the peaceful silence of an empty house, but the heavy, oppressive silence of a tomb. And then, the cold hit me. I dropped the grocery bags. The wine bottles clinked, a sharp sound in the quiet. I could see my breath puffing out in front of me. I walked to the thermostat. The screen was blank. I tapped it. System off. Current temp 52 degrees. 52 degrees? In November? Brady? I called again, my voice sharper now, slipping into my command tone. That's when I smelled it. Underneath the stale, cold air, something else. Sharp. Acrid. Ammonia. A smell I knew from field hospitals and bad situations. The smell of human waste. The knot in my stomach turned into a rock. I dropped my keys and ran toward the living room. Victor. The living room was shadowed, illuminated only by streetlights filtering through the blinds. But I saw him. Victor Harmon. A man who had once commanded a platoon in Vietnam, who stood 6'2" and terrified banking interns with a single glare, was curled up on his old rocking chair. He wasn't rocking. He was shaking. Wrapped in a single, thin, cheap fleece blanket my mother-in-law, Elaine, had bought at a discount store. He looked like a skeleton draped in gray skin. His lips were cracked and bleeding, dry as parchment. "Victor," I whispered, rushing to his side. I fell to my knees, the cold hardwood biting into my legs. He opened his eyes. Sunken. Surrounded by dark bruises of exhaustion. When he focused on me, a look passed over his face that broke my heart. Shame. Deep, humiliating shame. And then relief. "Jana," he rasped, his voice like grinding sandpaper. "Angel." I touched his forehead. He was freezing, yet clammy. I looked down. The smell was coming from him. His sweatpants were soaked. The puddle beneath the chair had frozen into a sticky mess. He had been sitting in his own urine for God knows how long. "I've got you," I said, my voice trembling with a rage I hadn't fully processed yet. "I'm here. I'm not leaving." I stood up, my mind racing through TCC protocols, warmth, fluids, hygiene. I needed to get the heat on. I needed to get him water. I ran to the kitchen. That's when I saw it. On the granite island, next to a fruit bowl with nothing but 3 rotted bananas, was a piece of lined notebook paper. Brady's handwriting. Scrawled. Hurried. Careless. I picked it up, my hands shaking so hard the paper rattled. Jana, Mom, and I decided to hop on that Carnival cruise deal last minute. Mental health break. We needed some sun. Since you're back, you handle Victor. He's been moody. Don't wait up. Back Monday. There was a smiley face drawn at the bottom. I stared at the paper. I read it twice. 3 times. Mental health break. They had turned off the heat to save on the electric bill. They had left a 72-year-old man with stage 4 pancreatic cancer alone in a freezing house, unable to walk to the bathroom, unable to get a glass of water, while they went to drink Mai Tais on a boat. They didn't just leave him. They discarded him. Like a piece of broken furniture cluttering up the living room. I looked back toward the living room where a war hero was shivering in his own filth, waiting for death because his family was too busy having fun. A shift happened inside me. The loving wife who bought wine and turkey died in that kitchen. The fatigue from my deployment vanished, replaced by a cold, crystalline focus. I crushed the note in my fist. I remembered the soldier's creed I had recited 1,000 times. I will never leave a fallen comrade. Victor was my comrade now. And Brady? Brady wasn't my husband anymore. He was the enemy. I set the crumpled note down, took a deep breath, and filled the glass with water. The mission had changed. Operation Thanksgiving was over. The counteroffensive had just begun. First priority, triage. That's what they teach you in the army. Stop the bleeding. Stabilize the patient. Secure the perimeter. My perimeter was this freezing, silent house. My patient was the man shivering in the living room. I cranked the thermostat up to 72. The furnace groaned, protesting the sudden demand, then kicked on with a low, dusty rumble. I went back to Victor. He was too weak to walk, so I lifted him. He felt impossibly light, like a bundle of dry sticks wrapped in that cheap fleece blanket. This was a man who used to bench press 300 pounds. Now I could feel his ribs through his soiled sweatpants. I've got you, Victor, I whispered, guiding him toward the master bathroom. We're going to get you cleaned up. I ran a hot bath, testing the water until it was perfect. I stripped off his ruined clothes, trying to be as clinical and respectful as possible. He squeezed his eyes shut, turning his head away. I knew that. Look, it was the humiliation of a warrior who had lost the ability to command his own body. It's okay, I said softly, sponging warm water over his back. You're safe now. After he was clean and dressed in a pair of Brady's thick flannel pajamas, which hung off him like a tent, I helped him back to the recliner. I went to the kitchen and opened a can of Campbell's chicken noodle soup, crumbling saltines into the broth, just like my mom used to do when I was sick. The smell of the salty broth filled the kitchen, finally chasing away the lingering ammonia. I fed him slowly, spoon by spoon. He ate with a desperate hunger that made my chest ache. When he finished, he leaned his head back and closed his eyes. Within minutes, his breathing evened out. He was asleep. Now the house was quiet again. But this time, it wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the silence before an ambush. I needed answers. I walked into the kitchen and saw the family iPad on the charging dock. Brady usually kept it there for recipes or sports scores. My hands were still trembling, not from cold, but from adrenaline. I swiped the screen. No passcode. Brady was too lazy for security. I was about to open the calendar to see when they'd left, but a banner notification dropped down, Instagram. You were tagged in a photo by Hannah_XO. My frown deepened. Who the hell was Hannah? And why was she tagging my husband? I tapped the notification. The app opened, filling the screen with a blast of bright, saturated colors. It was a photo from a sun deck. The ocean behind them brilliant, sparkling turquoise. In the foreground, holding a fruity cocktail with a little umbrella, was a girl who couldn't have been older than 24. Bleached blonde hair, fake eyelashes, a bikini top that barely contained her. And wrapped around her waist, wearing oversized aviator sunglasses and a grin I hadn't seen in years, was Brady. My husband. The caption read, #SugarDaddyVibes, #CruiseLife, #No worries. I felt the blood drain from my face. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might throw up. Sugar Daddy. My fingers flew across the screen, tapping out of Instagram and finding the Navy Federal Credit Union app. This was the lifeline. Every paycheck I earned from the Army. Every hazardous duty allowance. Every cent of our life savings went into that joint account. The little loading wheel spun for a second that felt like an eternity. Then, the numbers flashed onto the screen. Available balance, $1,245. I blinked. I wiped the screen, thinking maybe there was a smudge covering other numbers. Maybe it was supposed to be $12,000 or even $1,200. But no, $1,245. I tapped on checking history. The list of transactions scrolled past my eyes like a casualty report. November 20th, Carnival Cruise Line, $1,050. November 20th, Carnival Cruise Line drinks package, $600. November 21st, Seminole Hard Rock Casino ATM withdrawal, $5,200. $5,200 in cash at a casino. I gasped for air, clutching the edge of the granite counter to keep from falling. That money, that was the roof fund. 3 months ago, Brady had told me the flashing around the chimney was shot. He said the contractor needed a deposit. He said, "Babe, don't worry about it while you're deployed. I'll handle the house. You just stay safe." I had transferred $6,000 from my personal savings into the joint account for that roof. I had worked extra shifts, taken every overtime opportunity, eaten MRE slop instead of ordering out, just to save that money. There was no roof repair. There was no contractor. There was just Brady, a 20-year-old girl named Hannah, and a slot machine in Florida. He hadn't just cheated on me. He had robbed me. He had stolen the roof over our heads to finance a week of debauchery while his stepfather lay dying in his own filth in a freezing house. A scream built up in my throat. A primal sound of pure, unadulterated betrayal. It wasn't just anger. It was the realization that my entire life for the past 5 years had been a lie. I was the bank. I was the safety net. And he was the parasite. If you are listening to this and you have ever given your heart and your wallet to someone who stabbed you in the back the moment you turned around, hit that like button right now. I looked at the phone in my hand, the device that had just delivered the death blow to my marriage. I couldn't hold it anymore. It felt like it was burning my skin. With a guttural cry, I hurled the phone across the kitchen. It hit the drywall next to the refrigerator with a sickening crack, shattering into pieces that skittered across the tile floor. The noise startled me into silence. I slid down the cabinets until I hit the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. The tears finally came. Hot, angry tears that burned my cheeks. I buried my face in my hands, sobbing. Not for the loss of my husband, but for the sheer stupidity of trusting him. But as the tears fell, the soldier in me began to wake up. The initial shock of the ambush was fading. Now I needed to assess the damage. I needed a plan. And most of all, I needed allies. I looked toward the living room where Victor slept. We were the only two left. And we had nothing left to lose. The rage I felt in the kitchen didn't vanish. It just cold-forged into something harder. Something useful. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, took a deep breath to steady my pulse, and picked up the tray with the bowl of soup. I walked back into the living room. The only light came from the small table lamp and the streetlights filtering through the blinds, casting long prison bar shadows across the floor. "Dinner is served," I said, trying to keep my voice light. Victor was awake. He heard me coming. He didn't just lie there. He was gripping the armrests of the recliner, knuckles white, pushing himself up. It was painful just to watch. Every muscle in his body was atrophied, but he forced himself into an upright position, his spine not touching the back of the chair. It was muscle memory. It was the Marine Corps. Semper Fidelis. Always faithful. Even when your body is failing, you don't eat lying down like an invalid. You sit at attention. I set the tray on his lap. "Easy, Marine," I whispered. He looked at me, his eyes sunken deep into his skull, but there was a spark in them that hadn't been there an hour ago. "Thank you, Sergeant," he rasped. I sat on the ottoman across from him, watching him lift the spoon. His hand shook, a violent tremor that spilled broth back into the bowl. He paused, took a breath, and tried again. He refused to let me feed him this time. He needed this dignity. We ate in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the clinking of the spoon against the ceramic bowl. It was the companionable silence of two soldiers in a foxhole, waiting out a mortar barrage. "You know," he said suddenly, his voice thin but clear, "I saw the look on your face when you came in. The smell. It's handled, Victor," I said quickly. "Don't worry about it." "No." He shook his head. "It's not just the smell, it's the situation." He swallowed a spoonful of soup with difficulty. "She's waiting for me to die, Jana. Elaine. She's been waiting for 6 months. I stiffened. "Is that why she left?" Victor let out a dry, hacking laugh that turned into a cough. She left because I'm taking too long. She calls me a broken ATM, said looking at me ruins her appetite. He pointed a trembling finger toward the wall above the fireplace. Look. I turned. There was a rectangular patch on the floral wallpaper that was a shade lighter than the rest. A nail stuck out. Empty. Where is it? I asked. I knew what used to hang there. It was his shadow box. The display case holding his Vietnam service medals, his Bronze Star, his Purple Heart. The ribbons he had earned in the jungles of the Mekong Delta in 1968. eBay, Victor whispered. The word hung in the air like a curse. She sold them last week, said she got $500 for the lot. Told me nobody cares about old metal anymore. My blood ran cold. Selling a veteran's medals wasn't just greed. It was a desecration. It was stripping a man of his history, his sacrifice. I'm going to get them back, I promised, my voice low and dangerous. Leave it, he said, wincing as a spasm of pain shot through his abdomen. He dropped the spoon. His face went gray, sweat beading instantly on his forehead. He grabbed his stomach, groaning through gritted teeth. The pain? I asked, instantly switching into medic mode. He nodded, unable to speak. Where are your meds? I scanned the side table. There was a forest of orange prescription bottles. I found the one labeled morphine sulfate oral solution. Here, I said, grabbing the dropper. When was your last dose? This morning, he gasped. Before she left. I looked at the bottle. It was half full. I unscrewed the cap, preparing to drop the 20-milligram dose prescribed on the label. But as I pulled the dropper out, I paused. I'm a certified combat lifesaver. I've handled morphine, fentanyl, ketamine. I know what liquid morphine looks like. It's supposed to have a certain viscosity, a slight thickness like syrup, and it usually has a faint color. The liquid in the dropper was clear. Perfectly clear. And it dripped too fast. I frowned. I brought the dropper to my nose. Nothing. Morphine has a bitter, chemical smell. This smelled like tap water. I put a tiny drop on the tip of my tongue. It was tasteless. It was water. I stared at the bottle in horror. Victor, I said slowly, my voice trembling with a new kind of fury. Did she feel this? He nodded. I squeezed shut against the pain. She said the pharmacy raised the price. Copay was too high. She said she had to stretch it out. Stretch it out. I roared, slamming the bottle down on the table. This is water, Victor. She's been giving you water for stage 4 pancreatic cancer pain. She needed the money, Victor whispered, his voice laced with a bitterness that was sharper than the pain. She needed a new bag. A Coach bag for the cruise. The room spun. A Coach bag. Elaine had tortured a dying man, denying him pain relief in his final agonizing days, so she could buy a $300 purse to show off to strangers on a boat. This wasn't just negligence. This was torture. This was a crime. I stood up, pacing the small room, my hands fists at my sides. I wanted to fly to the Bahamas and drag her off that ship by her hair. Jana. Victor's voice cut through my red haze. I stopped and looked at him. He had opened his eyes. The pain was still there, etched into every line of his face. But something else had taken over. A steely, cold resolve. He wasn't looking at me like a victim anymore. He was looking at me like a commanding officer. Sit down, he ordered. I sat. He reached out his hand. His skin was paper-thin, spotted with age, but his grip was surprisingly firm as he took my hand. You think I'm just a senile old man, he said. You think she took everything? She drained the accounts, Victor, I said gently. Brady took everything I had. They took your pension checks. She took the checking account, Victor corrected. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. It was a terrifying smile. She took the joint account. She took the scraps. I let her. I stared at him. What do you mean? I was a regional bank manager for 30 years, Jana. Do you really think I'd let a woman who spends our electric bill money on lottery tickets have access to the main vault? He leaned forward, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. I have a trust. A revocable living trust. I set it up 10 years ago when I first got sick, before I even met Elaine. The portfolio is sitting at Vanguard right now. Stocks, bonds, the sale of my first house in Virginia. My eyes widened. $3 million, he whispered. And she doesn't know it exists. She thinks I'm broke. She thinks I'm a burden. He squeezed my hand tighter, his blue eyes burning with a fierce, dying light. They left me here to die in my own shit, Jana. They left you with nothing. They broke the code. He took a ragged breath. I don't have much time. Maybe a day, maybe two. But that is enough time for a final mission. I want to change the beneficiary. I want to rewrite the will. And I want you to help me burn their world to the ground. He looked at the empty spot on the wall where his medals used to be. They wanted my money, he rasped. They won't get a dime. But they will get a lesson. Are you with me, Sergeant? I looked at this man, my stepfather, my comrade. I felt the weight of the water-filled morphine bottle in my pocket. I thought of the empty bank account. I thought of the coach bag. I squeezed his hand back hard. I'm with you, Victor, I said. What are your orders? There's a quote by General James Mattis that every Marine knows by heart and every soldier respects. Be polite. Be professional. But have a plan to kill everybody you meet. He wasn't talking about murder. He was talking about mindset. Being ready to neutralize a threat the moment it presents itself, without emotion, without hesitation. As I sat in the dim light of the living room watching Victor sleep, that quote played on a loop in my head. I was done crying. Crying was for victims. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was the squad leader of a 2-person unit, and we were about to launch a psychological operation, PSYOPs, that would dismantle Brady and Elaine's lives piece by piece. The first step, evidence collection. I stood up and moved the comfortable pillows I'd propped behind Victor. I pulled the warm duvet down, exposing the thin, stained fleece blanket he had been found in. It felt cruel, but I needed the scene to look exactly as I'd found it. I needed the jury, whether that was a court of law or the court of public opinion, to see the neglect. I'm sorry, Victor, I whispered. He opened one eye. Do it, he rasped. He understood. I took out my phone and snapped a series of photos. Close-ups of his cracked, bleeding lips. A wide shot of the dark room with the thermostat reading 52 degrees in the background. A shot of the empty table where his water glass should have been. The photos were gritty, raw, undeniable. Step 1, complete. Step 2, human intelligence. I waited until 9 a.m., then walked across the snowy lawn to Mrs. Edith's house. Edith was 75, retired, and spent her entire day watching the neighborhood from behind her lace curtains. In the suburbs, a nosy neighbor is annoying. In an investigation, she's a goldmine. She opened the door, clutching her robe. Jana, I saw your truck. You're back early. I am, Edith, I said, putting on my best concerned neighbor face. I was wondering if you had a minute. I'm trying to piece together a timeline for Victor's doctors. 5 minutes later, I was sitting in her kitchen drinking Earl Grey tea. My phone was face down on the table, the voice memo app recording. It was terrible, honey, Edith whispered, leaning in. I saw Brady leave on Thursday. He had that girl with him. The blonde? I asked casually. Yes, the one with the fake eyelashes. Hannah, I think he called her. She was loud, talking about how she needed a tan. Edith shook her head, clucking her tongue. I saw them loading suitcases into your SUV. And poor Victor. I didn't see him come out once. I asked Brady if his stepfather was going. And do you know what he said? What did he say, Edith? He said, the old man is fine. He prefers the quiet. Then he laughed and slapped that girl on the bottom right there in the driveway. I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my expression neutral. And did you see anyone come check on Victor after that? Any nurses? Any caretakers? Not a soul, Edith confirmed. The house was dark all weekend. I was worried, but well, I didn't want to intrude. You've been very helpful, Edith, I said, standing up. I stopped the recording. I had a witness confirming abandonment and the presence of a mistress. Step 2, complete. When I got back to the house, a silver Lexus was pulling into the driveway. It was Patricia, Victor's attorney. A sharp woman in her 60s with a bob cut that looked like it could slice steel. She walked into the house, and the moment the smell of sickness hit her, her professional mask slipped. She looked at Victor, then at me, and her eyes filled with horror. Oh my God, she whispered. Patricia, we don't have time for pity, Victor said from the recliner, his voice stronger today, fueled by pure spite. We have work to do. Patricia sat on the edge of the sofa, opening her briefcase. She pulled out a thick file. I brought the portfolio documents you asked for, she said, glancing at me. Jana, are you aware of the structure of Victor's assets? I know he has a pension, I said. And I know Elaine complains that it's barely enough to cover the bills. Patricia exchanged a look with Victor. Elaine sees the checking account, which receives the monthly pension deposits. She does not see the trust. The trust? I asked. The Victor Harmon Revocable Living Trust, Patricia declared. Established 15 years ago. It holds the proceeds from the sale of Victor's primary residence in Virginia, plus a diversified portfolio of blue-chip stocks and bonds managed by Vanguard. She slid a paper across the coffee table. I looked at the bottom line. Total asset value, $3,245,000. My mouth fell open. $3 million? Elaine doesn't know, Victor wheezed, a dry chuckle escaping his lips. She thinks I'm a washed-up bank manager who made bad investments. I let her think that. I wanted to see if she stayed for me or for the money. He looked at me, his eyes hard. She failed the test. And Brady? Brady failed the moment he was born. If Victor passes, Patricia said clinically, under the current will, 50% goes to Elaine and 50% goes to Brady. The house is also in the trust. Change it, Victor commanded. Strike them out. All of it. I want Jana to be the sole beneficiary and the executor of the estate. And I want half of the liquid assets donated to the Wounded Warrior Project. Patricia nodded, her pen flying across the legal pad. I can draft the amendment right now. We just need to sign it and have it notarized. I am a notary. Do it, Victor said. While Patricia drafted the documents that would strip my husband and mother-in-law of every dime they thought they were entitled to, I moved to the final phase of the operation, the bait. I needed to give them one last chance, not because I thought they would take it, but because I needed to prove to a judge and to myself that they were beyond redemption. I opened my text thread with Brady. The last message was from me a week ago, telling him I loved him. It made me sick to look at it. I typed, Brady, please answer. It's Victor. He's in bad shape. I think he's dying. He's asking for you and Elaine. Please, you need to come home now. The ambulance is on the way. I lied about the ambulance. I wanted to add urgency. I watched the screen, delivered. Then the 3 little dots appeared. He was typing. My heart hammered against my ribs. Part of me, the stupid part, hoped he would say, oh my God, we're flying back immediately. The phone buzzed. Babe, chill out. Don't be dramatic. You know how he is. He has bad days all the time. Mom says he's just looking for attention. We're in the middle of a dinner show. We can't just fly back. He's tough. He'll be fine until Monday. Handle it. I stared at the screen. Don't be dramatic. Looking for attention. He had just signed his own death warrant. I didn't reply. Instead, I pressed the side buttons on my iPhone. Click. Screenshot taken. I stared at the image of the conversation. It was the final nail in the coffin. I had proof of abandonment, proof of medical neglect, proof of financial theft, and now proof of absolute moral bankruptcy. I looked up at Victor. He had just finished signing the papers with a shaky hand. He looked at me, exhausted but triumphant. Did he bite? Victor asked. I held up the phone. Hook, line, and sinker. Good, Victor whispered, leaning his head back. Now we wait. Saturday night descended on the house like a shroud. The temperature outside had dropped into the teens, and the wind howled against the siding. But inside, the silence was heavier than the storm. The only sound in the living room was Victor's breathing. It had changed around 6 p.m. It wasn't the rhythmic, steady breathing of sleep anymore. It was Shane Stokes' respiration, the death rattle. It would start deep and loud, rasping like a saw through wet wood, get faster and shallower, and then stop completely for 10, 15, sometimes 20 seconds of terrifying silence, before starting again with a gasp. I sat by his side, holding his hand, counting the seconds during the pauses. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Jenna, he whispered during a lucid moment. His voice was barely a shred of sound. I'm here, Victor. He looked at the ceiling, his eyes glassy. The Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. He quoted softly. Job 1 verse 21. Blessed be the name of the Lord. He was finding peace. He was ready. But his family wasn't here. And despite everything, despite the theft, the neglect, the cruelty, I needed to give them one last chance to do the right thing. Or I needed to document them refusing to do it. I pulled out my iPhone. I didn't call Brady. He hadn't answered my texts all day. I called Melissa, Brady's sister. She was the baby of the family, the one who always had her phone glued to her hand. I hit the FaceTime icon. I swiped down on the control center and tapped the screen record button. The little red dot started blinking. Ringing, ringing. Suddenly, the dark, somber living room was illuminated by a blast of harsh blue light from the screen. Oh my God, Jenna. The connection stabilized. The image was chaotic. It looked like they were in a piano bar. Red neon lights flashed in the background. A guy in a tropical shirt was banging on a keyboard. People were singing an off-key rendition of Sweet Caroline. Melissa's face filled the screen. She was sunburned, wearing a tiara that said vacation mode, and holding a drink that was bright blue. "Hey girl," she screamed over the music. "We can barely hear you. The signal is trash out here." "Melissa, listen to me," I shouted, leaning close to the phone so they could see the desperation in my face. "Put your mother on now." "What?" "We're ordering shots. Mom's dancing." "Put Elaine on the phone, Melissa. Victor is dying." The smile dropped from Melissa's face. She looked confused, then annoyed. She turned the camera around. The image swirled, showing a crowded table covered in empty glasses and half-eaten appetizers. Elaine was there. She was laughing, her face flushed from alcohol, wearing a sequin top that was far too young for her. Brady was next to her, his arm draped around Hannah, who was giggling at something he whispered. "Mom," Melissa yelled. "It's Jana. She's being hysterical again." Elaine grabbed the phone, bringing it close to her face. Her eyes were glazed. "Jana, what is it now? We are trying to enjoy the captain's dinner." "Elaine, stop drinking and listen," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of fury and grief. I angled my phone down so they could see Victor in the background, his chest heaving, his skin gray. "Look at him. He's in Shane Stokes breathing. He has hours, maybe less. You need to fly back tonight. There's a flight from Nassau to Charlotte at 6 p.m. I checked. Elaine didn't even look at her husband. She looked at me with pure disdain. "Are you crazy?" she snapped. "Do you know how much last-minute tickets cost? They're like $800 a seat. He's your husband, Elaine." I screamed. "He's dying." "Oh, stop it." She waved her hand dismissively. "He's been dying for 6 months. It's just a bad spell. Besides, these tickets are basic economy. They're non-refundable. We'd lose everything." I felt the blood in my veins turn to ice. "Non-refundable. You're worried about a refund while Victor is taking his last breaths?" Brady leaned in over Elaine's shoulder. He looked annoyed, like I had interrupted a crucial play in a football game. "Babe, seriously," Brady slurred slightly. "We'll be back Monday morning. Just keep him comfortable. Give him some more morphine or whatever." "I can't give him morphine, Brady," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Because your mother filled the bottle with tap water." For a second, there was silence on their end. Elaine's eyes widened slightly, but she recovered instantly. "You're lying," she hissed. "You're just trying to ruin our trip because you're jealous. You're an army nurse, Jana. You deal with dead people all the time. Do your job and let us enjoy our vacation. We'll see you Monday." And then the screen went black. Call ended. The silence that rushed back into the room was deafening. The Sweet Caroline sing-along was gone. The laughter was gone. All that was left was the sound of the wind outside and the ragged breathing of the man they had thrown away. I stared at the phone. The little red recording icon was still blinking. I stopped the recording. The videos saved to my photos. Evidence. Irrefutable. Damning evidence. I slowly lowered the phone and looked at Victor. I thought he was unconscious. I hoped he was unconscious. But his eyes were open. He was looking right at the blank TV screen where the reflection of the FaceTime call had just played out. He had heard it all. Non-refundable. Dear job. Enjoy our vacation. A single tear, thick and slow, rolled from the corner of his eye, tracking through the deep lines of his cheek before disappearing into the pillow. It wasn't a tear of pain. It was a tear of absolute heartbreak. The man had faced the Viet Cong, had built a career, had raised a stepson as his own, only to be told he wasn't worth the price of an airline change fee. He closed his eyes, and a shudder went through his frail body. Then he opened them again, and they landed on the corner of the room. Patricia, the lawyer, was sitting there in the shadows of the wingback chair. She had been there the whole time. She had heard every word. Her face was pale. Her lips pressed into a thin white line of professional fury. Victor turned his head slowly toward me. He didn't speak. He didn't have the breath for it. He just looked at me, then at Patricia, and gave a single sharp nod. Execute the mission. Patricia stood up immediately. She didn't say a word. She knew time was a luxury we no longer had. She walked over to the coffee table and laid out the documents she had drafted earlier, the amendment to the revocable trust and the last will and testament. "I need you to witness this, Jana," Patricia said softly. "And I'm recording the signing on my own device for redundancy." She placed a pen in Victor's hand. His hand was shaking violently. The tremors were uncontrollable now. I reached out to steady it, but he pulled away. He wanted to do this himself. He gripped the pen like it was a weapon. He summoned every ounce of strength left in his dying body, channeling all the betrayal, all the anger, and all the love he had for me into his right hand. The pen touched the paper. Scratch. Scratch. It wasn't a pretty signature. It was jagged and raw. But it was there. Victor Harmon. He dropped the pen. It rolled across the table and fell onto the floor with a tiny clatter. He looked at me, and for the first time in days, the tension left his face. The shame was gone. The worry was gone. He let out a long, sighing breath. He had severed the ties. He had protected his legacy. He squeezed my hand, his grip weak, but present. The deal was sealed. The family on the boat was still dancing, oblivious to the fact that they had just lost a fortune. And more importantly, they had lost the only man who had ever truly loved them. "It's done, Victor," I whispered, kissing his forehead. "Rest now. I've got the watch." Patricia left around midnight, taking the signed documents with her. She promised to file them first thing Monday morning before the courthouse even unlocked its doors. Now it was just the two of us again, me and the squad leader. The house was quiet, settled into the deep, groaning silence of a winter night. The wind outside had died down, leaving a stillness that felt heavy, like a held breath. Victor was awake, but barely. His eyes were open, tracking dust motes in the dim light of the table lamp, but I could tell he was seeing things that weren't there. Maybe the jungle canopy of Vietnam. Maybe his childhood home in Virginia. "Peaches," he whispered. I leaned in close. "What was that, Victor?" "Peaches," he rasped again, licking his dry, cracked lips. "Mom's cobbler." My heart squeezed. He wasn't asking for medication. He was asking for a memory. He wanted the taste of home one last time. "I'm on it," I said softly. I went to the kitchen and raided the pantry. I found a can of Del Monte sliced peaches in heavy syrup that had probably been sitting there since last Thanksgiving. I grabbed a stick of butter from the fridge and a shaker of cinnamon. I didn't have time to bake a real crust, and he wouldn't be able to chew it anyway. I dumped the peaches into a small saucepan, adding a generous slab of butter and enough cinnamon to turn the syrup a dark, rich brown. As the mixture heated up, the smell wafted through the kitchen, sweet, spicy, and warm. It smelled like safety. It smelled like the childhood I never really had, and the comfort Victor had tried to give me over the years. I poured a small amount into a mug and carried it back to the living room. "Careful," I said, sitting on the edge of the ottoman. "It's hot." I blew on the spoon, cooling the golden slice of fruit until it was safe. I touched it to his lips. He opened his mouth slightly, and I let the syrup slide in. He didn't chew. He just let the taste settle on his tongue. A look of pure, unadulterated bliss relaxed the lines of pain around his eyes. For a second, he wasn't a dying man. He was just a boy enjoying a treat. "Good," he breathed. "The best," I agreed, swallowing the lump in my throat. I fed him 3 more spoonfuls before he turned his head away. That was all he could handle. The energy reserves were depleting fast. He moved his right hand, fumbling with his left ring finger. His hands were so thin now that the heavy gold ring was loose, spinning around the knuckle. "Help me," he whispered. I set the mug down and gently took his left hand. I slid the ring off. It was his Marine Corps signet ring, heavy gold with a scarlet stone in the center and the eagle, globe, and anchor etched into the side. He had worn this ring every day for 50 years. It was as much a part of him as his skin. He held it in his trembling palm, the gold catching the lamplight. Then, with a surge of effort that made his whole body shake, he reached out and pressed it into my hand. "Take it," he commanded. His voice was weak, but the steel was back. "Victor, I can't take it." He wheezed. "You are the only one worthy of it. Brady. Brady is my wife's son. You." He locked eyes with me, his blue gaze piercing through the fog of morphine and death. "You are my daughter. You are my only child." I closed my fingers around the ring. It was still warm from his skin. "Do not let them have it," he hissed, his grip on my wrist tightening with desperate strength. "Do not let them laugh on my grave. Do not let them sell my life for a cruise ticket." "I won't," I vowed. "I promise you, Dad. I won't." He smiled. It was the first time I had called him Dad, and it was the last. He closed his eyes. "At ease, Sergeant," he whispered. At ease. I sat there for hours, holding his hand as the warmth slowly leached out of the room. The rhythm of his breathing changed. The pauses grew longer. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. 30. I watched the digital clock on the cable box. 2:58, 2:59. At exactly 0300 hours, Victor took a breath. It was a shallow, hitching sound. And then nothing. I waited. I counted. 1 minute passed. Then 2. The chest didn't rise. The struggle was over. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was absolute. It was the silence of a battlefield after the guns have gone cold. I didn't scream. I didn't wail. I didn't throw myself across his body. That's not what he would have wanted. He was a Marine. He deserved dignity. I stood up. My legs felt stiff, but I forced them to lock. I reached out and gently closed his eyelids, smoothing the worry lines from his forehead. He looked peaceful now. The pain was gone. The betrayal of his wife and stepson couldn't hurt him anymore. I picked up the signet ring from the side table where I had placed it. I slipped it onto my thumb. It was too big for my finger, and I curled my hand into a fist. Then I took a step back. I straightened my spine. I pulled my shoulders back, chin up, eyes forward. In the empty living room, at 3 o'clock in the morning on a snowy Sunday, I raised my right hand slowly to the brim of an invisible hat. I held the salute, a slow, somber salute for a fallen comrade. For a father. For a hero who had been discarded by everyone except me. Mission accomplished, sir, I whispered into the darkness. Relieved of duty. I dropped my hand. The house felt massive and empty around me. The smell of the peach cobbler still lingered in the air, mixing with the scent of the extinguished candle. By all rights, I should have been terrified. I was alone in a house with a dead body, bankrupt, and facing a war with my husband's family when they returned the next day. But I didn't feel fear. I looked at the ring on my thumb. I felt a strange, cold heat spreading through my chest. It wasn't grief. It was fuel. Victor hadn't just left me a ring. He had left me his resolve. He had passed the command to me. The tears finally came, hot and silent, sliding down my cheeks. But I wiped them away quickly. There would be time to mourn later. Right now, there was work to be done. I picked up my phone. I didn't call 911 yet. I didn't call the funeral home yet. First, I walked to the kitchen and opened the drawer where I kept the heavy-duty trash bags. Then I went to the closet and pulled out my dress blues. The grieving daughter had her moment. Now, the soldier had to prepare the battlefield. If you believe that our veterans deserve to die with dignity and honor, not abandoned for a vacation, hit that like button right now. Leave a comment with a flag emoji or just type respect to pay your final tribute to Victor. Let's show the world that we don't leave our heroes behind. Sunday passed in a blur of gray skies and calculated efficiency. At 0600 hours, 3 hours after Victor took his last breath, the funeral home van backed up the driveway. 2 men in dark suits stepped out, respectful and quiet. They moved with the same professional detachment I had seen in mortuary affairs units overseas. I signed the paperwork on the kitchen island, right next to where I'd found Brady's cruel note. "What kind of service would you like to arrange, Mrs. Mitchell?" the director asked softly. "A viewing?" "A chapel service." "Direct cremation," I said, my voice flat. "No viewing, no service, no obituary in the local paper." The director paused, his pen hovering over the clipboard. "Are you sure? Usually the family wants." "The family," I interrupted, staring him dead in the eye, "forfeited their right to mourn when they boarded a cruise ship while he was dying. I am the executor. I have the power of attorney. Direct cremation, immediate. I want the ashes back in my hands by tomorrow morning. I'll pay the rush fee." I wasn't doing this to be cheap. I was doing it to rob Elaine of her stage. I knew exactly what she would do if there was a funeral. She would wear black, weep into a lace handkerchief, and accept casseroles and sympathy from the neighbors she had lied to. She would play the grieving widow to perfection. I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. Victor was gone. She didn't get to say goodbye. She didn't get to perform. By noon, the house was empty of death, but it was also becoming empty of life. I spent the rest of Sunday dismantling my existence in that house. I didn't smash anything. I didn't scream. I simply erased myself. I packed my clothes, my books, my boots, and my gear into cardboard moving boxes I bought from Home Depot. I worked with methodical precision. Tape, seal, label, stack. I left Brady's things exactly where they were. His golf clubs in the corner. His video game controllers on the coffee table. His stupid framed photos of himself on the mantel. By sunset, the house echoed. It was a shell. I scrubbed the bathroom where I had bathed Victor. I bleached the toilet. I washed the sheets and remade the guest bed with hospital corners. I wanted the house to smell sterile. Like a courtroom. Like a place of judgment. I didn't sleep Sunday night. I sat in the dark, polishing my boots. Dip, rub, polish, repeat. Small circles. Over and over until the black leather shone like obsidian mirrors. Monday morning broke cold and bright. The sun reflected off the snow, creating a blinding white glare through the windows. It was 0900 hours. They would be home soon. I went to the master bedroom and opened the garment bag I'd hung on the back of the door. My army service uniform. The dress blues. Putting on the uniform is a ritual. It changes you. You're not a wife, a daughter, or a victim anymore. You're an instrument of the state. You are authority. I pulled on the crisp white shirt, buttoning it to the neck. I tied the black tab tie. Then came the jacket. The dark blue fabric was heavy structured. I buttoned the brass buttons, checking the alignment in the mirror. The gig line, the alignment of the shirt, belt buckle, and zipper flap, was perfect. I pinned my rack of ribbons to my chest, the National Defense Service Medal, the Global War on Terrorism Service Medal, the Good Conduct Medal. And right above them, I pinned my combat medical badge. I looked in the mirror. Jana the doormat was gone. Sergeant Flores was present for duty. I walked out to the living room to set the stage. I pulled the dining room table into the center of the room, directly in the line of sight from the front door. I arranged the chairs, pushing them back against the wall, so there was no place to sit. They would have to stand. Then I laid out the evidence. To the left, I placed the iPad. I had queued up the screen recording of the FaceTime call. The volume was set to maximum. Next to it, I placed a stack of papers, the bank statements from Navy Federal with the casino withdrawals and cruise charges highlighted in neon yellow. The printouts of the text messages where Brady mocked a dying man. In the center, I placed the amber prescription bottle, morphine sulfate. The liquid inside was clear water. It caught the morning light, looking innocent, but we all knew it was poison. To the right, sitting on a small velvet cloth, was the brass urn. I had picked it up from the crematorium at 0800. It was heavy, solid, and cold. Victor was in there. All that was left of a 6'2" Marine was 5 pounds of ash and bone. And finally, right next to the urn, I placed my sidearm, my Sig Sauer P320. I had dropped the magazine and cleared the chamber. It was completely unloaded. It wasn't there to be used. I wasn't going to shoot them. That would be too easy. And I wasn't going to prison for trash like them. The gun was a symbol. In American culture, a gun on the table means the conversation is serious. It means I am protecting this ground. It means don't tread on me. It was a psychological barrier that said, I am dangerous and I am done playing nice. I checked the time, 10:15 a.m. I heard the rumble of an engine down the street. Faint at first, then louder. The distinctive purr of Brady's SUV. I walked over to Victor's rocking chair, the one he had died in. I turned it so it faced the front door directly. I sat down. I rested my hands on my knees, my back straight, my feet flat on the floor. I didn't rock. I sat as still as a stone statue. The car door slammed. Then another slam. Man, it is freezing out here. I heard Brady's voice, muffled through the door. Did she seriously not turn the heat back up? I need coffee, Elaine's voice whined. And I need a shower. That boat water does something to my hair. Wait until you see the tan lines, babe. A younger, shrill voice giggled. Hannah. She had come back with them. Of course she had. She probably thought she was moving in. I heard the key scratch against the lock. The tumbler clicked. My heart rate didn't spike. My breathing didn't hitch. I felt a cold, icy calm wash over me. This was the ambush. I had the high ground. I had the intel. And I had the firepower. The door handle turned. Honey, we're home. Brady shouted, pushing the door open, bringing a gust of freezing air and the smell of stale airplane peanuts into the house. He stepped in, dropping his bags in the foyer. A fake smile plastered on his face. Jana, you here? He looked up. He saw the uniform. He saw the medals. He saw the urn. And finally, he saw the gun. The smile slid off his face like slop off a tray. Welcome home, Brady, I said. My voice was low, steady, and absolutely terrifying. Take a seat. Court is in session. The sound of the key in the lock was like a gunshot in the silent house. I didn't flinch. My hands rested on my knees, gloved in white ceremonial cotton. My back was rigid against the wood of the rocking chair. I stared straight ahead, my gaze locked on the space where their faces would appear. The door swung open and the silence was instantly murdered. Man, I am telling you that buffet was worth the heartburn. Brady's voice boomed, loud and slurred. He stumbled into the foyer, dragging 2 large suitcases. And the duty-free shop. Babe, you promised me that perfume. Hannah's voice, high-pitched and grating, followed him. I got you the perfume, didn't I? Brady laughed, slapping her on the rear end as she walked past him. They spilled into my house like a toxic oil slick. First, Brady, looking sunburned and bloated in a tight polo shirt. Then Hannah, wearing a white tracksuit that was already stained with coffee, clutching a bag of souvenirs. Then Elaine and Melissa, both looking exhausted and hungover, their skin an angry shade of lobster red. They brought the smell with them, stale pina coladas, coconut sunscreen, and the distinct musky scent of airplane cabin air. It clashed violently with the sterile bleach and peach smell of the house. Brady dropped the bags with a heavy thud. "Jana, we're home. Hope you didn't miss me too," he froze. He had walked past the entryway and into the living room. He stopped so abruptly that Hannah bumped into his back. "Ouch!" "Watch it, Brady," she whined. "Shut up," Brady whispered. He was staring at me. For a moment, nobody moved. The scene was surreal. Me, sitting in full dress blues, medals gleaming under the chandelier, face like stone. Them, in their vacation clothes, holding half-empty Starbucks cups. And then his eyes drifted down to the table. He saw the stack of bank statements. He saw the iPad. And then he saw the matte black finish of the Sig Sauer P320 lying next to the brass urn. The color drained from his sunburned face, turning him a sickly shade of beige. "Jana," he stammered, his voice trembling. "What? What is this? Why are you wearing your uniform? Is that a gun?" Elaine pushed past him, oblivious as always. "Oh, stop being dramatic, Brady. She's probably just back from some parade." She looked at me with a sneer, dropping her heavy purse on my clean floor. "Well, don't just sit there like a statue. Where's Victor? I hope you changed his sheets. I don't want to smell him when I go to my room." She looked around, sniffing the air. "Actually, it smells decent. Did you finally hire a maid?" I stood up. The movement was slow, deliberate, and commanded absolute attention. The leather of my boots creaked softly. I didn't look at Brady. I didn't look at the mistress cowering behind him. I looked straight at Elaine. "Victor isn't in his room, Elaine," I said. My voice was calm, but it carried across the room with the weight of a gavel. "Well, where is he?" "Hospital." She rolled her eyes. "Great. Another bill." I slowly raised my white-gloved hand and pointed a single finger at the heavy brass urn sitting on the velvet cloth in the center of the table. "He's right there." Elaine followed my finger. She squinted. She looked at the urn, then back at me, confusion knitting her eyebrows together. "What is that?" "That," I said, "is Sergeant Victor Harmon. He was permanently relieved of duty at 0300 hours yesterday morning." The silence that followed was suffocating. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Hannah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Melissa dropped her phone. It hit the floor with a crack, but she didn't even look down. Elaine stared at the urn. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Then the realization hit her. "He's dead," she whispered. "Cremated," I corrected. "As per his final orders. No service, no viewing, no chance for you to pretend you gave a damn." For a split second, I saw the calculation in Elaine's eyes. She wasn't processing the loss of a husband. She was processing the optics. She realized she was standing there in vacation clothes while her husband was in a jar. She realized she looked like a monster. So she did what she always did. She performed. Oh my God. Elaine let out a shriek that sounded like a siren. She threw her hands up and collapsed onto the sofa. My sofa, burying her face in the cushions. "Victor, my Victor, no. How could you let this happen, Jenna? You killed him. You didn't take care of him." She began to wail, a high-pitched, rhythmic sobbing that was devoid of any actual tears. Brady snapped out of his shock and immediately jumped on the bandwagon. He stepped forward, puffing out his chest, trying to regain control of the room. "You didn't call us," he shouted, his face turning red again. "You let him die alone. You didn't even tell us. What kind of sick game is this, Jana? Bringing a gun into the house. Are you crazy? You're having a PTSD episode." He was gaslighting me, trying to make me the villain, trying to make me the unstable veteran while he was the grieving son. "I called," I said coldly. "I texted. You told me not to be dramatic. You told me the tickets were non-refundable. Liar." Elaine screamed from the sofa, lifting her head. Her eyes were dry. "I never said that. We would have come back instantly. You kept us away." "Yeah," Brady sneered, gaining confidence. "You wanted him dead so you could, I don't know, steal his pension checks. You're sick, Jana." He looked at Hannah for validation. "Can you believe this? She's lying to cover her own incompetence." I didn't argue. I didn't scream back. I simply picked up the remote control from the table. I thought you might say that, I said. I pointed the remote at the 60-inch TV mounted above the fireplace. So, I brought a witness. I pressed play. The screen flickered to life. The image was grainy, shot in low light, but the audio was crystal clear. Victor's face filled the screen. He looked terrible, skeletal, pale, eyes sunken, but his gaze was focused intensely on the camera lens. Elaine stopped wailing mid-sob. Brady froze. On the screen, Victor took a ragged breath. My name is Victor James Harmon, the voice from the TV rasped. It echoed through the room, ghostly and undeniable. I am of sound mind and body. Today is Saturday, November 25th. Victor paused on the screen, licking his cracked lips. I am recording this statement because I know my wife, Elaine, and her son, Brady. I know they will lie. I know they will say they didn't know. On the screen, Victor held up a piece of paper. It was the crumpled note Brady had left. They left me here to die, Victor said, his voice gaining strength from pure anger. They turned off the heat. They left me without food. And when Jana called them, begging them to come home, I heard them. Elaine was shaking now. Real shaking, not acting. I heard my wife say the tickets were non-refundable. Victor said, spitting the words out. I heard my stepson tell his wife to handle it. The Victor on the screen leaned closer to the camera, his blue eyes burning with a final, terrifying intensity. Let the record show I owe them nothing. They are not my family. They are scavengers, and I am done feeding them. The video cut to black. The room was absolutely silent. Elaine was sitting up on the sofa, her face pale as a sheet. Brady looked like he was about to vomit. Even Hannah had stepped away from Brady, looking at him with a mixture of horror and disgust. I lowered the remote. That, I said, my voice cutting through the air like a knife, was his closing argument. I looked at the terrified group huddled in my living room. The vacation was over. The hangover was just beginning. And now, I said, gesturing to the kitchen where the footsteps of a lawyer could be heard clicking on the tile, here comes the verdict. The click of Patricia's heels on the hardwood floor was the only sound in the room. She walked out from the kitchen hallway, a leather portfolio tucked under her arm, looking like an executioner in a tailored suit. She didn't look at Elaine or Brady. She walked straight to the dining table, placed the portfolio next to the urn, and opened it. Who the hell is this? Elaine demanded, her voice shrill but shaky. She was trying to regain her footing, but the video of her dying husband had knocked the wind out of her sails. I am Patricia Reynolds, she said calmly, adjusting her glasses. I am Victor Harmon's attorney, and I am here to execute his final will and testament as amended this past Saturday night. Brady scoffed, crossing his arms over his chest. He was trying to look tough, but his eyes kept darting to the gun on the table. Will? The old man didn't have a dime. He was living off his pension. That is what he allowed you to believe, Patricia said, pulling out a document stamped with the official seal of the Commonwealth of Virginia. In reality, Mr. Harmon was a very savvy investor. His assets, held in the Harmon Revocable Living Trust, included a diversified portfolio at Vanguard and real estate holdings, valued at approximately $3.2 million. The air left the room. Elaine's jaw literally dropped. Her eyes bulged. $3 million. He had $3 million, and he made me use coupons for detergent. She grabbed the edge of the sofa. He wanted to see if you loved him, Elaine, I said, my voice quiet. Or if you just wanted to pay out. Well, I'm his wife. Elaine shrieked, scrambling to her feet, the grief instantly replaced by greed. I'm the next of kin. That money is mine. Brady, did you hear that? We're rich. Patricia cleared her throat. It was a sharp, dismissive sound. Actually, Mrs. Mitchell, you're not. Patricia stated. She lifted the document and began to read. I, Victor Harmon, being of sound mind, do hereby amend my trust distribution as follows. To my wife, Elaine Mitchell, and her son, Brady Mitchell, I intentionally leave nothing. Nothing. Brady choked out. That's illegal. You can't just cut us out. He can, and he did, Patricia continued, ignoring him. The specific language he used was, for their abandonment and cruelty in my final hours. The entirety of the estate, 100% of the assets, is to be divided as follows. 50% to the Wounded Warrior Project to support veterans who have actually served their country. She paused, looking over her glasses at me. And 50%, along with the role of sole trustee and executor, to his stepdaughter, Jana Flores. Brady turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. You gave half his money to a charity and gave her $1.5 million. She's not even blood. She was the only one holding his hand while you were holding a margarita, Patricia snapped. She closed the file with a final thud. The paperwork was filed at the courthouse at 0800 this morning. It is ironclad. You can try to contest it, but with the video evidence of neglect and abandonment Jana has collected, no judge in this state will give you a cent. In fact, you'd be lucky to avoid paying legal fees. Brady looked like he had been punched in the gut. He turned to me, his eyes wild. Jana, baby, listen. This is crazy. We can fix this. You know I love you, right? We're married. That money is our money. Community property. I laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. Community property? You want to talk about our money, Brady? I reached for the stack of papers on the table. I picked up the photos I had printed from his Instagram, the ones of him and Hannah on the cruise. I threw them at him. They fluttered through the air like confetti, landing at his feet. This is where our money went, I said. $5,000 from the roof fund. $1,800 for the cruise. $600 for drinks. I pointed at Hannah, who was standing awkwardly by the door, clutching her Louis Vuitton bag, which I now suspected was fake. You stole my savings to play sugar daddy to a girl who looks like she's barely legal. I spat. You emptied our joint account. You left me with $12, Brady. $12. Hannah looked down at the photos scattered on the floor. Then she looked at Brady. Then she looked at me. Wait, Hannah said, her voice nasal and confused. You said you were a real estate developer. You said you owned this house. He's unemployed, I corrected her. And he's broke. He doesn't have a job. He doesn't have an inheritance. And as of 5 minutes ago, he doesn't have a wife. Hannah's eyes widened. She did the math instantly. No inheritance. No wife to leech off of. No house. She reached for the door handle. Babe, Hannah. Brady turned to her, desperate. Where are you going? My Uber is 3 minutes away, Hannah said, pulling out her phone. You paid for the cruise on a credit card, didn't you? That means it's going to bounce. I'm not getting stuck with the bill. Hannah, wait. Don't call me, she snapped. She opened the door and walked out into the snow without looking back. The door slammed shut, sealing the silence. Brady stood there, hands twitching. He had lost the money. He had lost the girl. And now he realized where he was standing. Get out, I said. What? Brady blinked. This is my house. I've lived here for 5 years. This house was purchased by Victor in 2010, Patricia interjected smoothly. It is an asset of the trust. As the sole trustee, Miss Flores has the right to manage the property as she sees fit. She has issued an immediate eviction notice. Patricia pulled a single sheet of paper from the file and handed it to Brady. You are guests who have overstayed your welcome. You have 24 hours to remove your personal effects. If you remain on the premises after 10 a.m. tomorrow, the sheriff will be called to remove you for trespassing. You can't do this. Elaine screamed, marching up to the table. She looked deranged, her hair messy, her eyes manic. I am a senior citizen. You can't throw me out in the snow. I'll sue you. I'll tell everyone you abused him. Abuse? I repeated softly. I reached for the final item on the table. The amber prescription bottle. I held it up to the light. The clear liquid sloshed inside. Speaking of abuse, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than her screaming. I had the contents of this bottle tested by a private lab yesterday. Do you know what the report says, Elaine? Elaine froze. Her face went from red to ghost white. It says 100% tap water, I continued. Tampering with a controlled substance is a felony. Elder abuse involving the withholding of medical care is a felony. And, since Victor died in pain because you wanted to save money for a Coach bag, I slammed the bottle down on the table. I've already submitted the lab report and the bottle to the detective unit at the Fayetteville Police Department. They are very interested in speaking with you. Elaine let out a strangled sound, clutching her chest. She stumbled back, collapsing into Brady's arms. Prison, Elaine, I said, leaning over the table. You're not looking for a lawyer to sue me for the money. You need a criminal defense attorney to keep you out of a jumpsuit that matches your orange skin. I looked at Brady, who was trembling, holding his mother up. You have 24 hours, I said. Take your golf clubs. Take your video games. Take your mother. And get out of my sight. I picked up the Sig Sauer and slid the magazine back in. The click of the metal locking into place echoed through the room. Dismissed. I walked out of the front door and into the biting cold of the North Carolina winter. The air hit my face like a splash of ice water, shocking and incredibly purifying. It felt different than it had an hour ago. When I had entered this house, the cold had felt like death. Now it felt like freedom. I marched down the walkway toward my truck, my boots crunching rhythmically on the packed snow. I didn't rush. I had nowhere to be and everywhere to go. Behind me, the front door slammed open again. Jana, wait. Please. It was Brady. He ran out onto the porch in his socks, slipping on the icy concrete and nearly face-planting into the azalea bushes. He didn't have a coat on, just that ridiculous tight polo shirt he had worn on the cruise. He looked pathetic. A sunburned, shivering man-child standing in the ruins of his own making. I reached my truck and put my hand on the door handle, but I didn't open it. I turned around slowly. I wanted to see this. I wanted to remember exactly what he looked like in this moment. He scrambled down the steps, ignoring the cold soaking into his socks, and ran toward me. He stopped a few feet away, panting, his breath puffing out in white clouds. His nose was running, and his eyes were wide with a frantic, animalistic panic. "Baby, please," he gasped, reaching out a hand, but pulling it back when he saw the look in my eyes. "You can't leave like this. You can't just kick us out. Where are we going to go? We don't have any cash." "That sounds like a personal problem, Brady," I said, my voice steady. "It wasn't my idea," he blurted out, the words tumbling over each other. "It was Mom. You know how she is. She guilt-tripped me. She said Victor was fine. She said he was exaggerating. I wanted to come back, I swear. She made me stay." I stared at him, feeling a wave of revulsion so strong it almost tasted metallic. There it was. The final defense of the weak man. Throwing his own mother under the bus to save his skin. "You're 34 years old, Brady," I said. "You're not a child. You made a choice. You chose the buffet over the man who raised you. You chose a 20-year-old girl over the woman who paid your bills." I was confused. It was a mistake. He fell to his knees in the snow, clasping his hands together. "I love you, Janie. We can fix this. I'll kick Mom out. I'll never talk to Hannah again. Just don't take the money. Don't take the house. Please." He wasn't crying for me. He wasn't crying for Victor. He was crying for his lifestyle. He was mourning the loss of his free ride. I looked down at my left hand. The simple gold band and the diamond solitaire sat there, glinting in the winter sun. I had worn these rings through 2 deployments. I had twisted them nervously while mortar rounds shook the earth in Syria, praying I would get home to the man who gave them to me. They didn't feel like symbols of love anymore. They felt like shackles. I pulled the glove off my left hand with my teeth. The cold air bit at my skin. "Brady," I said softly. He looked up, hope flickering in his watery eyes. Yeah, babe." I gripped the ring. It was tight. My fingers were swollen from the salt in the MREs and the stress, but I yanked it over my knuckle. It scraped my skin, leaving a red mark, but then it was off. I held it up. "Do you know what we call a soldier who abandons his post in the middle of a battle?" I asked. "What?" He blinked, confused. "AWOL," I said. Absent without leave. I took a step forward and threw the rings. I didn't toss them gently. I threw them with a pitcher's aim. They hit him square in the center of his chest, bouncing off that polo shirt and disappearing into the deep snowdrift beside the driveway. "You went AWOL on this marriage, Brady. You abandoned your post." He scrambled in the snow, frantically digging where the rings had fallen, like a desperate dog looking for a bone. "I am hereby discharging you," I said, looking down at him, dishonorably. He stopped digging and looked up at me, his face crumbling. "Jana, how much did you know about the money?" "About everything." I opened the door of my truck and climbed into the driver's seat. The cab was cold, smelling of old coffee and gun oil. A smell that was infinitely more comforting than the coconut sunscreen stench of the house. I looked down at him one last time. "I knew enough to keep the paper trail," I said. "Always keep the receipts, Brady. You never know when you'll need to return a defective product." That's cold," he whispered, shivering violently. "No," I said, slamming the door shut. "The price you're paying today? That's cheap. Victor paid with his life. You're just paying with your comfort." I turned the key. The engine roared to life. A deep, throaty growl that vibrated through the seat. I didn't wait for the heat to kick in. I shifted into reverse. Brady scrambled back as the tires crunched over the snow. He stood there alone in the driveway, barefoot in the snow, watching his meal ticket drive away. I pulled out onto the street and shifted into drive. As the house got smaller in my rearview mirror, I saw the front door open again. Elaine stumbled out, wrapped in a blanket, screaming something at Brady. He turned on her, waving his arms. They were already turning on each other. Without a common enemy, and without money, They would tear each other apart before sunset. I looked away from the mirror and focused on the road ahead. The sky was a brilliant, piercing blue, the kind of blue you only see after a heavy snowstorm clears. I reached up and touched the heavy gold chain around my neck. The signet ring, Victor's ring, rested against my collarbone. It felt warm, like a small coal of fire against my skin. A verse from Sunday school floated up from the recesses of my memory. Victor had quoted it sometimes back when his mind was clear. Psalm 23 verse 4, "Yeah, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." I had walked through that valley this week. I had walked through the shadow of death in that freezing living room. I had faced the evil of indifference and greed, and I hadn't been afraid. "I hear you, Dad," I whispered to the empty cab. "I fear no evil." I wasn't just a survivor anymore. I was a victor. I reached over and turned on the radio. Classic rock. Creedence Clearwater Revival. Fortunate Son. It felt appropriate. I wasn't going back to the barracks. I had 30 days of leave saved up. I had a check for $1.5 million waiting to be processed. I had a new mission, to find a place where the air was clean, where the neighbors looked out for each other, and where loyalty meant something. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but for the first time in my life, I knew exactly who I was. Family isn't whose blood runs in your veins. It's whose blood you bleed for. It's the people who stand shoulder to shoulder with you in the trench when the mortar rounds start falling. Brady and Elaine were just biological accidents. Victor was my family, and I had honored him. I rolled the window down an inch, letting the cold wind whip through my hair. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the sharp, clean air of a new beginning. The bill was paid. The ledger was balanced. I pressed my foot down on the gas, leaving the suburbs, the betrayal, and the ghosts behind me in a cloud of exhaust and snow dust. I was finally going home. That was my final mission for Victor. But I know the war against toxic families happens every day behind closed doors. Victor taught us the most important lesson of all: blood doesn't make you family. Loyalty does. I know many of you have walked through your own valley of the shadow of death just to find peace. I want to hear your voice. Have you ever had to cut ties with a family member to save your own soul? Tell me what you think. I really want to know. Thanks for watching. Take care. Good luck.